The Lifeflight Network is an emergency critical care service dedicated to providing helicopter and fixed-wing transport to seriously ill and injured patients in a safe, timely, and cost-effective manner while providing compassionate, expert medical care. The Lifeflight Network saves lives. The medical crew is a highly skilled and equipped critical care team with the expertise to serve first responders in the shared goal of achieving the best possible outcome for victims of medical and traumatic emergencies. As a first responder, you play a critical role in your community by recognizing the need for air ambulance transport, preparing the patient for flight, and helping the flight crew to identify a safe landing zone. This video is designed to assist you when calling in Lifeflight. The more you know about how to use Lifeflight as a medical resource, the more lives you will positively impact. Remember, Lifeflight is not just rapid transport. It provides a nationally accredited level of care not available by any ground ambulance in Oregon or Southwest Washington.
Lifeflight went into service in 1978, and Lifeflight was the 4th program in the nation. At the onset of Lifeflight's history, we just had one nurse and one pilot. We realized the importance of flight paramedics and decided that we wanted them on board with us, and it's been a great team since then.
The nurses that work for Lifeflight come from a wide variety of backgrounds and many years experience. Most of us have over 10 years experience in critical care and emergency rooms. We bring to the table a little bit more of the critical care aspect, and in conjunction with the paramedic that also has over 10-15 years of experience in the field is a very good combination, and we work really well together to provide really optimum critical care with our paramedic partners. In the field we can give blood. We also have the ability to do chest tubes in the field, and we also have the ability to do central lines if you can't get access. We also have the ability to do surgical critics in the field. We also carry a wide variety of critical care medications that a lot of paramedic crews don't carry.
Medic 21, respond to 1300 Park Avenue. Vehicle versus bicyclist with confirmed injuries. Repeating for Medic 21, Engine 21, respond to 1300 Park Avenue. Vehicle versus bicyclist with confirmed injuries. Cross Street, Delphil Court, James Street, map number 2028, time map 1121.
Every patient you encounter should be evaluated to ensure the most appropriate level of care is provided. This evaluation applies to not only victims of trauma, but it also includes those who are suffering from serious and time-sensitive medical emergencies, such as heart attack or stroke. Calling in Lifeflight increases the potential to save a patient's life. As you begin to receive information for each call, it will be important to make an assessment of that particular situation and patient to determine if you need to call Lifeflight.
The criteria is really based on, is it a trauma entry and time? What time of day is it? And also, if we have multiple patients, we may use Lifeflight as a transporting resource.
The most important factor is time. Time is of the essence, that golden hour. And the quicker you get them in the air and there, the quicker they're going to get back to where they need to be to a higher level of care. And that's what it's about.
The clock is ticking, and that's the primary purpose of the helicopter, is to reduce the amount of time for the patient to get from the scene to appropriate care.
Lifeflight is not just for trauma. Time is often more critical for medical and obstetrical emergencies than even the more often transported trauma patients. National trends are showing the increased use of critical care helicopters for medical and obstetrical emergencies, with a resulting positive impact on outcomes and survival.
We are seeing more and more of the scene medical calls, where it's a scene call not necessarily involving trauma. More and more of these seem to be heart-related or potentially stroke-related, where Just like trauma, time is of the essence. And because of distance or delays, those kind of things, the first responders are thinking about getting this patient to a higher level of care where the problem can be definitively treated.
When in doubt about transport, imagine the victim in front of you as a family member or friend, and oftentimes the decision becomes clearer. When you call Lifeflight, you can either put them on standby or directly activate them. Some first responders will direct activate Lifeflight as they receive information prior to patient contact if there's a strong likelihood of need of air ambulance service.
When we're put on standby, dispatch gathers information that they would need and we would need to respond to the scene. They let us know by radio that we're on standby.
Copy.
That way we can get ready for the flight. It gives us an opportunity to get ready and get things moving along so that if the agency does decide they need us, it's just a very quick way of getting us.
Do a direct activate if you know that you have a critical patient. If not, you can put them on standby. Then if we activate, they're ready to go.
Some weather conditions are not safe for scene calls. You may be asked to relay scene weather information to your dispatch center to assist the flight crew. Lifeflight is able to fly in rain and snow. Visibility is a bigger issue than precipitation. When the decision is made to use Lifeflight, the only information that needs to be relayed is the location of the incident, a ground contact, and a radio frequency. As soon as you arrive at the scene and determine if Lifeflight might be needed, an LZ officer should be established and put in charge of locating a safe landing zone. Always remember, the final decision to land and ultimate responsibility for the safety of the landing zone rests with the pilot, not with ground personnel.
The landing zone safety officer is one person that is chosen by the agency that's doing the landing for us that can contact Lifeflight. He's kind of our eyes on the ground. We really depend on him.
We have a landing zone officer who gets dispatched over to that area ahead of time. Sometimes it's a complete engine company, sometimes it's just a chief who can break away from the scene. We get the communications set up with Lifeflight as quick as possible.
And they're going to go ahead and they're going to just go through you then, that one person. That way there's not 4 or 5 people telling them what to do and they don't get confused.
The landing zone officer is in charge in making sure that that perimeter is kept. The security of the landing zone needs to be maintained.
Setting up the landing zone is a relatively simple procedure. There are only a few considerations. Some of these include how big of an area the helicopter needs to land in, the characteristics of its slope and surface, and any potential hazards, especially overhead wires or things that might get blown by the rotor wash.
When Lifeflight requests a landing zone be set up, what we look for is basically a square that's 100 feet by 100 feet. We can land in tighter areas. 100 is the best condition. If you have a landing zone that's not quite 100 feet, don't say, hey, this won't work. It may work for us fine. We can see a lot more from the air than they can from the ground.
Definitely, primary concern for both parties is just having a nice open area and explaining clearly, these are the obstructions. You've got power lines, you've got trees, we've got a building over here. You know, that's stuff that they're going to want to know.
Certainly you think about the hazards from the pilot's perspective.
Wires are hard to see. Another thing that we have to think about is the slope of the ground. We can't land with anything that's steeper than about 10 degrees. Once again, if the LZ officer isn't sure what 10 degrees is, the pilot can look at the landing area when he arrives. We can attempt a landing, and if it's too steep, we can move the aircraft.
Rotor wash is pretty intense, and that's why grass or asphalt or a mowed field are the best things to bring it down on.
A common area to choose for a landing zone is a roadway. Roads have the benefit of being a smooth surface and are typically close to the incident.
You're going to want to make sure that if you're landing it, on a roadway, it is completely blocked off and there's no way for anybody to get around or through. Very important.
If you're going to use areas that people are used to walking through or driving through, it takes a lot more security to set up a LZ perimeter and maintain it for a certain amount of time.
After a safe landing zone has been located, the next step is to set it up for the helicopter, if you have the time and resources. The LZ may not always be adjacent to the scene. Alternate sites may be further from the scene or at a safe rendezvous site. Because some first responders use Lifeflight on a regular basis, they have planned ahead and picked out several safe landing zones in their area.
You want to prepare for an LZ before you ever need one, so we have several pre-designated landing zones in Canby Fire District. Every now and then we'll add a new one to the list.
As the landing zone is being prepared, the ground crew is preparing the patient for air transport, as they would for ground transport.
To prepare a patient to go in the helicopter is pretty much like preparing to transfer a patient at the hospital. If you have multiple wires and life packs attached and IV bags and all that type of stuff, it has to kind of be condensed and ready to move. You don't want to be running around with IV bags up like this and disconnecting your monitor in the landing zone. You want to do all that stuff as early as possible.
The patient should be strapped or in full C-spine if possible. It's much easier to load because we just take the board and put it on the air stretcher and then go.
When the Lifeflight helicopter comes into radio range, there are certain protocols the flight crew and ground crew will follow before it lands.
When Lifeflight approaches a landing area, it's always a good idea for the landing zone officer to contact the helicopter and tell us that you have us in sight. Once we have a visual contact with you, we'll let you know. When we arrive at the scene, we're going to do an orbit overhead. And what we're doing during that turn over the accident area is we're looking for wires and any obstacles that we might potentially hit or on the way in or on the way out. And we're going to be asking the landing zone officer for some specific information about that LZ. And some of the items that we want to know are, do you have any wind down on the ground? I mean, how strong is it? And can you give us a general idea of where it's coming from? Also, are there any wires or trees?
After the flight crew determines the LZ is safe to land in and the aircraft is on final approach, radio communication between the flight crew and the ground should be limited to emergency transmissions only.
I think the less radio traffic, the better. Certainly as they're approaching, you don't want to be talking to them when they're approaching or they're taking off, unless it's an abort type of issue.
If the landing zone officer or anybody that's on the radio in the landing zone sees an obstacle or a hazard that they think is going to be a potential hazard to us and we're heading for it, please shout out. Tell us to abort the approach or wave us off. We'll come back and look at it again if we didn't see what it is that you're looking at.
When the helicopter touches the ground, you stay out of the LZ. Don't get distracted away from your duty as the landing zone officer. Pay attention, and to don't lose your focus. It can be easy to do, especially if you have a real serious scene.
Never approach the aircraft while it's running unless they have direct eye contact with one of the medical personnel. My biggest safety concern during a landing and in the LZ, I would have to say, is the tail rotor.
As the flight crew exits the helicopter and joins the first responders, they will quickly assess the patient and request information about the event.
Our concerns are in many ways going to parallel the first responders' concerns in terms of the ABCs.
When the flight crew gets in the back of the ambulance, flight crew gets report from the ground crew, and we determine if any advanced procedures need to be done, and usually doing a quick ABC assessment. We like to know the mechanism and if they have any major allergies or anything vital, about the situation that the physician would ask us, so we can relay that as well. It's great if they can hand us a little piece of paper that has all the little stuff that they've been writing down about the patient, name, birth date, that kind of thing, and maybe a quick set of vitals. It's not necessary, but it is nice to be able to just put that in your pocket and go, and it helps to expedite sometimes.
Once we get a sense of what's going on with the patient, we'll make sure that the patient's properly packaged up, and we'll just have a controlled movement of the patient towards the helicopter.
Remember, if you're wearing a helmet, to put your chin strap on and tighten it down.
Make sure that there's no baseball caps on. Just a mental note to please remove it before you get close to the rotor system. We also like to ask that people If they don't need to be close to the aircraft, they stand outside the rotor disc.
After the flight crew and ground crews have exchanged information, it's now time to move the patient to the helicopter.
The key thing is safe and controlled and follow the directions of the flight crew. People should stay together. One of us will choose to stay with the patient and monitor the patient's transport to the helicopter. The other will go back to the helicopter a minute or two earlier than that, open the doors, make sure that the helicopter is prepared for the patient. And pretty much in as controlled a manner as possible, we're going to be sliding the backboard onto the pedestal. In the process, handing off the ambu bag if the patient's intubated, and making sure that IVs and the oxygen bottle are also managed. The oxygen bottle we're going to hand back off to the EMS crew so they can take that back there with them. And as the patient is loaded into the aircraft, no one is kind of wandering off, especially back towards the tail rotor, which is a huge concern for us.
There's no hanging around. I mean, as soon as they don't need us anymore, we're out of the landing zone and out of the hazard area. So it's pretty quick once you're in there.
Well, at that point, it's pretty much the flight crew's job to buckle the patient in, move the patient back into the aircraft, close the doors, and then we're done. I'd like people to stay together, and as they leave, walk away from the aircraft, they basically retrace the path that they took heading back to the scene.
Lifeflight crews are active 24/7. Landing a helicopter is normally an easy and uneventful process, but darkness can present some challenges to the LZ commander and flight crew.
Night landings bring some special considerations for us.
Darkness always adds an element of safety that you have to think about.
Anytime they're landing at night, I think you need to be extra careful because there may be obstructions that you don't see. Power lines, that's when it's important to know your area.
Coming into a landing zone in LZ at night can be more hazardous than during the day. Obstacles aren't as visible.
We do a high reconnaissance when we arrive at the area. We have some special lights on the aircraft. When we circle the area, we're looking for those wires and trees and whatever else we can spot. Wires are very hard to see.
And you got the wires.
The flight nurse generally talks to the landing zone personnel, and they'll ask for additional information.
We're just carrying the wires.
We don't like to see headlights pointed directly towards the landing zone. That can hurt the pilot's vision.
During the approach, people for some reason want to shine their lights at the helicopter. And when that bright light hits that, it does a couple of things. First, the light diffracts on the windshield. You can't even see through the window. And it's very possible the pilot will lose his night vision. So we ask that you don't shine any lights at the aircraft at all. So lights are a huge consideration.
Although night vision goggles will assist in the safe landing of the helicopter, all standard precautions should be followed.
Well, Lifeflight makes a difference because of time. Lifeflight can shave so many minutes off a transport that it has nothing to do with how good the ground medics are. It has to do with time and getting them to surgery. Or, say, a cardiac patient, if you can make that hour transport or that 50-minute transport into 15 minutes, you're doing that patient a world of good.
I see Lifeflight as just another tool that we can use that definitely helps with patient care.
We pride ourselves in making a difference for that person that needs us badly.
The things that Lifeflight brings are speed and quality of care. And for patients that need those two things in particular, we deliver.
I feel like Lifeflight makes a difference in the rapid transport that we provide, as well as the advanced critical care aspects that we bring to the field for the patients.